Hello, Texas Tomo, Team 651 Spin and Go coach.
I don't know who you are.
How are you? I am about to record the next YouTube video.
If you are looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money.
Thanks for asking. I've literally got nothing. I'll just start recording and see what happens.
If you let my
Variance.
go now, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you.
All right. Okay, that'll be the plan then.
Viel Glück.
Hang up. Hello everybody, welcome ladies and gentlemen. Texas Tomo here, your spin and go coach. I have no plans for this video, but I think I've got a mini plan. Spin and go variance. That's what we're going to talk about today. And not because the YouTube algorithm said we should make a video about this, because I'm genuinely interested in talking about spin and go variance. And you should be too. Let's pull up our old friend Swung Sim. Now, if you're a spin and go reg, you most probably will have used Swung Sim or seen Swung Sim or done some calculations or watched a video where someone's done some calculations. If you've never seen Swung Sim, you should definitely watch this video because I think it will be helpful. I believe the creators originally of Swung Sim were from SmartSpin. What a fine stable that is. Other stables are available as well. But let's talk a bit about what we want to use it for and some of the features and what that could mean for you and your game. And let's kind of run through a few examples. So let's make the assumption that you're a $1 player and you have, if you want to go back and watch our $1 series, you can go and look at the various chips available. We'll say you have 75 chips and you play about 5,000 games a month and you get, let's say, 40% rate back. You'll expect to make about $450 a month. Very nice.
King in the castle, king in the castle.
However, one of the things I think we should all be doing is not including top multiplier EV in our results. I've heard lots of stories about people complain how badly they run. I'm running $10,000 below EV. And then you ask them, have they included their top multiplier? And they sort of look at you like, what? And the reason you should never do this is because for the majority of us, this tournament's never happening. That's unfortunately a sad truth. Even if we all play, 99% of us watching will not hit the big spin. And therefore, we should just not include it as part of our month-to-month, day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year calculations. And if, one of us hits it, what a lovely bonus. And that's how we should treat it. Now, if we take away that top spin, you can see that in this case, for a $1 grinder, they're making about 12 bucks less a month, assuming they're playing 5,000 games. They're making about $12 less per month. This is with the top multiplier EV included versus the top multiplier excluded. Now, one thing I want to talk about is how impactful chip EV can be in terms of your variance. So there's a few things we're going to mention, but we'll start with how impactful is chip EV on your variance. Subtitle, yes, it's very impactful. Subtitle, and I'll show you why. So we're going to draw a little graph for you guys. We're going to keep it firstly in just real money terms, because I think most of you might be interested in real money terms to start with. So we'll do a little graph here. First thing you'll see, this graph is meaningless. What on earth have you done? Very good question, YouTube audience, viewer. I forgot to exclude the top multiplier, which we said we were going to do, because you can see that it sort of messes up any sense of proportion. So this is our $1 player. As we mentioned, they have a chip EV. Did we give them 80 chips, 75 chips? And they're playing 5,000 games a month and we're running 3,000 simulations. Let me just quickly confirm. It was 75 chips. So each of these little squiggles represents a simulation of that player's results over these 5,000 games. You can see that by the end of it, every single player's made money. That's pretty cool. If you were to take the results after, halfway along, there would be a bunch of players, almost 1% of them, that would still be losing money. It does show one of the key takeaways I want people to take away from this is sometimes the long term can be much longer than you realize, and you should really be viewing results not in the short term, but in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. Now we can play around a little bit and just show you guys a few different things. So one of the things, this was our 75 chip EV player. Let's say he plays better and let's say he has 125 chips. Now, some of you may be saying, well, that's impossible. To which I say, maybe if you'd like to check Micro Mondays to see how our chip EV is coming along, you're very welcome to have a look. But let's do 125 chips just to experiment. I think we had 40% right back. We'll take away this. We'll make it 5,000 games. So this is our player who has 125 chips. Now, a lot of you may see this. I'm going to try and put them next to each other and you can compare the two. Okay, so we have two graphs here which represent 5,000 games of each player. On the left, we have the 75 chip EV player. On the right, we have the 125 chip EV player. If you were to look at the gap between the 1% and 99 percentile, and what I mean by this is the player that's given those expectations, has hit the bottom 1% of expectancy versus the top 1% of expectancy, you can see that there is a gap here of around $645 or so. If we look in this case and we look at the 1% and the 99%, what can you see? A gap of around $643. So the actual size of the margin is the same. What isn't the same is the perspective, because the height is so much higher. Now, I know that sounds kind of a bit strange to say. It looks like it's got a lot finer. It looks like your distributions are much narrower. They're actually not in absolute terms. But it's just a matter of perspective. If we were to extend this graph up to, on the left, up to 1,500 chips, you'd have the same area of that wedge, if you like, covered. But it's just a perspective because on the right-hand graph, we're covering a lot wider in terms of our y-axis. Is that making sense? I think I've done a decent job explaining that. If not, our YouTuber did a terrible job.
No! God, please, no!
Let's do an example of someone with slightly lower chip EV and just see how that impacts it. Okay, and so in this case, we're going to have a 50 chip EV player at the $1 games, 40% rake back, 5,000 games. Again, take away top multiplier. And again, let's draw that. And so in this case, again, you can see what looks like wider variance. And again, we can demonstrate that's not actually the case in absolute terms. You see a $600 gap between the top and the bottom 1%, which is the same here. But it looks like a much wider bell curve because of the area that's being covered being wider. That's quite an important point. Texas Tomo's top tip for dealing with variance in poker and spin and goes. Advice number one, there is no absolute guide, and anyone trying to make an absolute guide is frankly very foolish. But thank you for watching this absolute guide to how to deal with spin and go variance. Tip number two, it's very situational and very dependent, and your absolute EV line should not be viewed without this context. I would encourage every professional and full-time player to make sure they're fully up to date, that if they say, oh, I make 3k EV a month, there's very different ways that 3k EV can transpire. And let's demonstrate that right now. You're back in the room. All right, so here we have 3 different players, all of whom are very happy because they're making 3k EV. Player number 1 says, I'm the best player. Player number 2 says, no, I'm the best player. And player number 3 says, no, I'm the best player.
Whoop. Here I come.
Now, which one's right? Well, there is actually kind of a right answer here, but let's figure it out together. What we're going to do is we're going to run visualizers for all of them. So let's draw a new visualizer here. Let's draw a new visualizer here. And let's draw a new visualizer here. And we can see how each of these players has their months making their 3k EV. Now, don't forget, each one of these players has the same expectation. However, you can see some pretty different looking monthly graphs. Now, just to explain what we've done, in this case, we've got a $5 grinder making decent chip EV, playing 5,000 games a month with 45% rake back. In this case, we've done a $25 player, again, playing slightly fewer games with slightly worse chip EV than the $5 player. And in this case, we've got the $100 player with quite marginal chip EV. I think we gave him 21, playing a decent amount of games. So just to kind of give a demonstration of how not all EVs create equally. Now, is there a right answer? Because technically, if you do this if you run this to infinity, all of these players have the same monthly EV. That's very, very true. I'll demonstrate that, by the way. We'll do another test in a second just to run these numbers to a year and see how that changes things. But for the moment, ask yourself, if you wanted to make 3k EV a month, are you prepared to be the player on the right? That means that there's a good chance once a year, they're going to have a 10k losing month if they're playing for real money. And there's a decent chance within 10 years, they're going to have a 20k losing month.
Boy.
And within 5 years, they're going to have a 15k losing month. Now, if you're a $25 reg, pretty unlikely you'll actually have a losing month. It's probably about, this numbers are not exactly, but like a 50-50 chance maybe you'll have a losing month a year. But actually, you've got a pretty good chance of having winning months most months. And if you're the player on the left, these numbers stay the same. It's almost impossible you'll ever have a losing month playing that style with your high chip EV and your decent volume. So the upsides, of course, are also different, and that's something to mention. The hundreds player is obviously going to have a chance of having a very big month. And often I think in spin and go, you see a lot of these headline grabbing things. You know, someone has a 30k month, a 40k month, a 50k month. Those are often very impressive, and it's not to put discredit towards that work, but it's to understand that, especially at the high stakes, if you looked at, say, $1k players and looked at their results, it's easy to focus in and hone in on those monthly big numbers and think, oh, I'm not doing very well in spins. If you are, say, a $25 grinder and you're making 5k a month. There are a lot of guys who are making a lot more money at lower stakes than some regs are at higher stakes, playing with a lot less variance and a lot less stress in their life. And I think that's really, really important to mention. Again, there isn't a right answer here. Some guys are very, very happy to accept the volatility. Stables, EV deals, staking, that will play a part as well, and we'll move on to that as well. These are things to certainly take into account. Now, long-term helps. Let's demonstrate this. What we'll do, we're going to make all of these graphs now move to a yearly time frame. So we're going to 12x all the volume, and let's see what happens. Okay, we've added all the games, and you can see very quickly before we load these, all of them making about $36,000 EV in the year. Very exciting. Let's see how their yearly graphs will look. I really want to reinforce the fact that all of these three individual player types have the same expected value in terms of their end results. But you can see that even over a year's sample, you can have extraordinarily awkward variance to deal with if you're not careful about looking at the wider picture. So please, 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 if you're a spinning player and you haven't got staking, or even if you have got staking, make sure you're thinking about the broader picture and the impact of variance on your results, rather than just thinking, well, I'm an X chippy player, I play X amount, I'm going to make that EV, happy days. Can be extraordinary amounts of variance. EV deals help a lot with this. So the EV deals, all these three players are going to have far less variance, and we'll do a quick simulation of that as well. But if you're unstaked, these are things to worry about. And if you're unstaked, I would really encourage you guys to not go too far towards the right-hand side of these player types. Keep your buy-ins a little bit lower, keep your chip Vs a little bit higher, and you will have far less losing months. You won't ever have a losing year. Your income will be far more consistent. If you're a player on the right, despite having a very profitable expectation, if you're playing on your own roll with a real money deal, it's really difficult. The first thing, of course, is you can go years without winning. That's not fun for anybody. Second thing, you need a big bankroll if you're going to be this player on the right here. Just to quickly look at, if we looked at the downswing, and we looked at the, let's say, 50% chance of a downswing, you at some point during the year, within this, half the players have had a $30,000 downswing. It's pretty hard to see. That's a really scary thing, I think, for guys that are unaware. You're having that, taking those marginal edges. Please, please, please be very cautious if you are self-rolled in these marginal spots. In this spot, happy days, right? You haven't really got anything to worry about. We look at the biggest downswing here. Half the players are downswing greater than $335. Most of us could probably afford the emotional swings with that. And that's one other thing to mention. You have a far less emotional swing, by the way, if you're playing in this style than this style. So let's do one more thing, because I know I've bored a lot of you already, maybe. Takes us to almost tip number 3. Are we on 3? Please, if you're self-rolled, make sure you're aware that all EVs are not created equally, and make sure you're aware of the actual bankroll management that's required. There is not such a thing as a strict, fast and hard bankroll management rule, because it depends on your skill level, it depends on your chippy V, it depends on things like rake back and rake you pay. This player on the left, when we talk about their bankroll requirements, if they were to go on the worst downswing possible, 726, it would be about 150 buy-ins for them, actually a bit less. So if they maintain 150 buy-ins, they would have a less than 1 in 1,000 chance of ever going broke. If this player on the right had a 150 buy-in bankroll, 99% of them would go broke. So I hope that demonstrates a little bit. There is no fast and hard rule about you need X amount of bankroll to survive in these games. Have I done the maths right there? Because that seems extreme. Yes, I have this time. That's extreme, huh? And if you take the middle version, got to times it by 25 now. 150 times 25 is, and as we all know, and I've definitely not just looked up on the calculator, 150 buy-ins times 25 is 3,750. And if we were looking here at this middle player, they would 80% of the time be okay with a bankroll of 150 buy-ins. But realistically, 200 buy-ins would be a much better case. 300 buy-ins would be in that never going broke case. So never going broke in this case, 150. Never going broke in the middle case, 300 buy-ins. Never going broke in this case, 1,000 buy-ins. I hope that shows you some of the differences that we encounter in spinning variance. My final little suggestion for guys who are playing higher and have marginal win rates relative to, you know, a big ROI and are worried about the impact of variance. Here's why it's so important, I think, to get yourself some insurance, get yourself an EV deal, get yourself in a staking pool, something along those lines. We'll leave our original guy, this is their year, and what we'll do is we'll draw, in this case, the identical player, but let's give them an EV deal. So I'll give it EV chip mode. We'll give them 21 chips, which is the same we had last time. Standard deviation, this is a little dependent on how they play, etc., but we'll give 400 as a generic one, and let's have a look and see how things develop. Okay, and so these are, every line here represents their chip EV and not their actual dollar amount. This represents a different metric on which to analyze your game and your results, and you can see it's a lot more condensed in terms of the results that you see here. EV swings are much lower than dollar swings. I hope that's For most of us, that's fairly clear, but the EV swings basically take out the multiplier aspect of spins, and they just make every spin like a 3x. Now, with 21 chips, you still have a little bit of a buffer here. Rather than a buffer going from minus 50,000 to plus 126,000, we can actually look and see what would this buffer mean. Let's get some EVs. If you were to have 16.4 chips, in this case, you could see that your bottom 1% is now minus 2,000. Don't forget, we were previously looking at minus 50,000. You've now, bottom 1% is minus 2,000. If we were to look at the bottom 10%, in a results-based industry, it's minus 11,000. In a EV mode, if we take the bottom 10%, you can see that now we're making profit. Already you can see just how much of a condensed results you're working with when you have an EV deal. If you take the top end and we will look at, for example, 90%, we're going to see the same thing in the top end coming down a little bit. So in this case, the top end 85,000. In our EV case, the top end of 23.3, we're looking at 55,000. So what an EV deal does essentially is it squashes very effectively the extremes of that bell curve in terms of your results. I don't know if I can squash something well with my hands. I would recommend everybody probably playing 50s and above. If they're playing without super high chip EV, to really consider getting an EV deal. One of the challenges, again, we talked about is you need, 1,000 buy-ins or something to sustain the sort of swings when you're talking about results term. If you have staking and you have an EV deal, that's 1,000 buy-ins that you no longer need as liquid poker capital. And you can just invest in whatever you like. You do stuff with it and provide a return in other ways. And so, yes, you give away some money when you take the kind of insurance, but it's pretty much a win-win situation. And so the stakers are typically quite happy because, if you're a profitable player, you make some money for them, you make some money for yourself. But for most players, it's a good idea too, and especially the high stakes players. Now, if you're playing $5 games and you've got a very high win rate, you obviously don't need staking. You may want to get into some sort of school perhaps to help you progress into the games at the highest stake and see what's available. In terms of the variance you'll experience of the spin and go tables, that's not necessarily something you'll need anytime soon. Once your chip EV gets lower, once your effective ROI gets a little bit lower, your variance, whilst not necessarily increasing relative to the absolute sense, your variance is increasing relative to a larger part of your results dipping into negative numbers more of the time over longer samples. That's probably the best way I can phrase it. I hope that was interesting. A very different sort of video today. So if you dislike the fact there wasn't any spin and go content where we're playing, please hammer that dislike button. Sorry. If you liked it and you would like more videos like this, let me know. Let us know. That'll be nice as well. Just ignore all of the above if you spin the million, because then you don't need to worry about it. Just laugh at the rest of us 99.99%ers trying to make ends meet as you're there in your $1 million spin. Good luck in that. If you don't win it, you can come back and watch this video and figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. If you do win it, enjoy your desert island